Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome, and thank you for joining us. I'm Farah Kimji, the founder of Futura Funds and the president of Toronto Crew. We are so happy to have so many of you join us online today for today's signature event. Before we get started, I'd like to share more about Toronto Crew, as I know we have several non-members in the audience today. The mission of Toronto Crew is that we are dedicated to helping women excel, influence, and lead throughout their real estate careers. Toronto Crew members are key decision makers of some of the most influential corporations in Canada, representing almost all of the disciplines in commercial real estate. Members have immediate connections to high performance professionals across all disciplines of commercial real estate within Toronto. Our organization is committed to quality programming and events that attract the brightest and the best in the industry. Membership will expand your professional network and let you develop leadership skills while serving on committees, expanding your knowledge of the commercial real estate industry. And we provide the opportunity to grow your career and gain support from your peers. As part of Crew Network, the industry's premier business organization, Toronto Crew is transforming the commercial real estate industry by advancing women globally. With over 300 members in Toronto, we are part of Crew Network's expansive membership of 12,000 professionals in over 75 markets globally, providing our members with direct access to real estate professionals across all geographies and disciplines. Over the last several months, our board and leadership teams have been working very hard to deliver quality programming in this new environment, and I'm very proud of the accomplishments to date. We've been able to offer a variety of ways for our members and the industry to stay engaged. And we have we've also launched a new committee, Inclusivity, Diversity, Equity, and Allyship, our IDEA committee. We've collaborated with several other industry associations, and we've leveraged the amazing programs that Crew Network has been providing to our chapters and members. These past several months have really shown me personally the power of Crew and what can happen when we come together, in person or not, to support and advance the women in our sector. And I'm very proud and humbled to be part of this organization. Today, we would especially like to acknowledge that we have invited all of our Canadian chapter members to participate in this event as well. We welcome you here today and thank you for joining us. Before we get into today's event, I want to make note that we have several upcoming events in the coming weeks, and we encourage our members and non-members to visit our website to gain more details over that. Today's session, just so everyone knows, is being recorded and will be available for viewing after this. We also encourage that throughout today's session that you submit your questions and we'll be sure to address them. So without further ado, today's event is brought to you by our signature sponsor, KingSett Capital. Founded in 2002, KingSett has raised $12 billion of equity for its growth, income, urban, mortgage, and affordable housing strategies. Currently, KingSett has $3.2 billion of assets under management. KingSett continues to seek further opportunities to invest in a wide range of real estate properties, developments, joint ventures, and mortgage lending. Today's event is especially special as we have a past president of Toronto Crew, Anna Kennedy, leading us in this discussion. Anna Kennedy is the Chief Operating Officer of KingSett Capital, and she will be interviewing Jon Love, the founder and CEO of KingSett Capital. So without further ado, I will now pass it over to you, Anna, to kick off today's discussion.
Thank you very much, Farah, and good afternoon and welcome everyone. And thank you for joining us today. And welcome to you, Jon. We're very delighted to have you do this interview with us. I think the way for us to get started is everyone would be very interested in understanding how you came into the real estate industry and then an overview of how your career progressed as you came to be one of its top leaders.
Well, thank you, Anna. And again, it's our pleasure to both sponsor the event and participate today. In university, business school, Ivy last year, I was looking for a job. I ended up doing something I never thought I would do, which is to be a retail stockbroker, which turned out to be a phenomenal 5 years. And I had a wonderful time as a retail stockbroker. But at the age of 26, I then said, do I want to do this for 39 more years? Thinking in a very linear, you work till you're 65 and then stop basis. Decided I want to do something different. So at that time, I joined Oxford Properties. My father had started Oxford. I joined Oxford as a leasing coordinator in Toronto. In the ensuing over 20 years at Oxford, I was a leasing coordinator and then a property manager, then a project manager, then a development manager, then a regional manager, then a regional officer. And by 1992, I was president, I guess, in the late 80s. By 1992, I was CEO of Oxford, right in the teeth of the deepest recession our industry has ever seen, which was a great learning opportunity indeed for me. When we had the opportunity to work with a great team, and we did some interesting things at Oxford. And by 2001, we'd reached a scale in Canada where we had to either go long or go deep. And go long is taking our office platform into other geographies, and go deep was to stay in Canada but do other assets. And the decision was to sell. So we sold the business in 2001 to Omers, who's done an amazing job with the franchise since then. And then in 2002, I started KingSett, basically around a thesis. Could we create a niche private equity business that would focus on an opportunity fund? And that's where we started with our growth funds. And as we have evolved with KingSett, we've added more funds, more strategy, more people. And here we are today.
It's great. Thank you, John.
And what about your story?
Sure. I'd love to share a little bit about my story. I did a BCom at Queen's, which led me to accounting. And my very first job was at PricewaterhouseCoopers as an auditor. And the first audit that I did in my career as an auditor was Cadillac Fairview. And from that day forward, I had the real estate bug. When I decided to leave audit to go into industry, I sought a position in real estate. I got 2 offers, one of which was Oxford. And fortunately, I made the best decision of my career. Soon after joining Oxford, I was asked to do a stint in Denver, Colorado. The leadership of the company at the time had decided to centralize all of its operations in Toronto. Previously, management had been quite decentralized throughout the North America. I helped centralize the Western US division. Then I helped centralize the Eastern US division, hiring teams to bring it all back home to Canada. I began to think of myself as a builder as I worked through my career, and I think that this is where that first began. In the ensuing years at Oxford, we went through a number of phases. We were public and then private and public and part of the pension plan. And all the while, I was leading the building of teams, programs, and platforms. After leaving Oxford, I thought I was retiring from real estate. I took a position as the CFO and then the acting CEO of a large national charity, a health charity. And I was quite surprised, actually, that I learned more about how the other side of the world worked at the time. But 18 months in, John came and offered me the opportunity to join KingSett, where I could contribute to the building of a new real estate private equity investment platform. And then it really was as though everything that I'd done to that point was in training for this role. So that's
what Anna didn't tell you is I tried to hire her 3 times. And so I was 3rd time lucky.
And it all worked out. Okay, John, you have some amazing stories about mentorship and lessons in leadership that you've learned along the way in your career. And we at KingSett have all had the benefit of learning and hearing and learning from those stories. Can you share some of those with us today?
Sure. I've been blessed with many great mentors along the way. And you know, in my view, mentorship is hard to do in a structured basis. Wisdom is hard to schedule. And the key is you have to be open to listening and receiving lessons when they're presented. Many people have and continue to share their wisdom with me along the way. And I just go through a few stories. I'll start chronologically. In 1977, when I started as a retail stockbroker, after about 3 months in, my father asked me how it was going. And I said it was a little bit difficult. And he said to me, when you go see someone, show up with two ideas. And that single piece of advice taught me that when you have a meeting with someone else, you have to be relevant. And it turned out that propelled quite a successful career in the retail brokerage business. In 1980, when I started with Oxford as a leasing coordinator, I was told that the rent in 347 Bay at the time I was looking after, they're all 500 square foot tenants. And I was told that the rent we wanted was $850, and the way to get $850 was to ask for $9. So I saw the first tenant and I said, and he asked what's the rent. I said $9. He said, how about $8? I said, split the difference, $850. He said, yes. Second guy, I said $9. He said $750. Thinking on my feet, I said, split the difference, $850. He said yes. By now, I think I'm a genius. Third person, biggest tenant in the building, 2,200 square feet, been there 35 years. He said, what's the rent? I said, $9. And he said, fine. So all of a sudden I had a problem because I had someone who hadn't ground and I could not take advantage of them. So bringing up my Maclean's magazine calculator, I quickly calculated what we could do for him that would effectively rebate 50 cents in his rent. Fourth tenant asked me, what's the rent? I said, $850. He said, how about $750? I said, if I wanted $750, I would have asked for that. And I told him my story, which I've told hundreds of thousands of times since then, which is, it's all about transparency, clarity, integrity. 1992, I had to go to first time I had to do this, I had to go to a lender and say we couldn't make an interest payment on time. Pretty terrifying. July 4th, 36 degrees out, take the cab to go see the lender. I'm sweating profusely, nervous as heck. I go in and I had sort of a pitch. I had some ideas. We could do this, maybe do that, and so on and so forth. When I left, as I go through the door, he says, thank you. Now, thank you was not what I was thinking I would hear. So I stopped and I said, thank you. He said, John, we have three kinds of borrowers. First kind, borrow money and pay us back. We like them the most. The second kind are people that borrow money, don't tell us the truth, obfuscate, maybe damage our collateral, and we go out of our way to hurt them. I don't know what third is, but this isn't going well so far. So I said, what's the third kind? And he said, third kind are people that have a problem, come in, are honest, and tell us what their problem is and have a plan. We'll work with them and we'll work with you. And that set the whole tone for the Oxford time in the early 90s, where we didn't have to declare CCAA. We did work through our issues with all our lenders. And so the issue of, again, transparency and integrity, really set that stage. And I'll give you just one other, story. In 92 through 95, 1992, Oxford was in a relatively difficult state, as was the entire industry, and most of our competitors were going bankrupt. And Oxford was was maybe the 10th largest firm in the business, so we were a small player. And out of that were very low expectations, but we set high objectives. So part of leadership is being bold. In 1992, we said, let's see if we can double the management business in 2 years. Now, in 3 years. Someone had said, well, it's taken us 30 years to get to 10 million feet. How are we going to double it in 3 years? And I said, I don't know, but that's where we're going. Turns out we got to 25 million feet by 1994, 2 years later. 1995, when we had, a $400 million of assets and $100 million equity valuation, our goal was to be the largest commercial owner in the country, which seemed unreasonable and audacious. But with the acquisition of Marathon and some others, by 1998, we actually were the largest commercial landlord in the country. So being bold is a key important part of leadership. And I would say, the last mentor I've had along the way is my wife, my wife of 43 years, whose wisdom's always helped me to do the right thing. And it is not what to do, but how to do things. And that's made a big difference. In sum, I think leadership has four key components. First is adherence to values. The right thing is always the right thing. Second is consult, but decide. Leaders have to make decisions, and mistakes are okay. They're just a byproduct of decisions. You have to lead from the front. You got to set the agenda. You have to know where you want to go. And then lastly, be bold. People want to be associated with a leader that has a big idea and a big vision. And so being bold is okay. Now, Anna, you've achieved great success. Can you share your insights on mentorship and some lessons you've received along the way?
Sure, John. I agree that mentorship comes from many sources. It can be very formal, but it can also be very informal. So we learn so many things from our colleagues and our friends, as well as mentors and sponsors. I'm going to share a couple of different thoughts with you. One is a very early career lesson that I had about inspiring confidence. I had been invited to make a presentation to the board of directors of Edmonton Center, something I had never done before. Fortunately, I'd had the opportunity to present to the audit committee the previous week, so I was a bit practiced in it. But I did my presentation, and the senior investor in the room was a gentleman named Ron Ruest, senior officer at the TD Bank, and he was a very gracious listener. He did a lot of nodding, and the meeting went very well. But most importantly, it was a surprise to me. Also in the room was Jon Love, who had never seen me make a presentation before. And so it was really important that I was prepared. He pulled me aside after the meeting and said to me he really liked the way that meeting went and the way it was handled. And I learned a very important lesson that day, and that my job was to inspire confidence, to be prepared, to control the room, and to be seen as a steady hand. And that was something that I learned from and practiced thereafter at Oxford. The second important lesson was a little later, doing the right thing, no matter how difficult or unpopular that might be. And it came in the early recession, in the recession of the early 90s. Like everyone else, real estate, for our public company, it was under some pressure. And our audit partner, Bill McFarland, who was at PwC and later went on to be the CEO of PwC, he was struggling with a decision to require a going concern note in our financial statements. I knew that was going to be a very unpopular outcome, but I also knew that he was right. And so I kind of made it my responsibility to socialize that issue with senior management at Oxford. And I paved the way for Bill to be able to make his recommendation. And that was really an issue that built one of the most important relationships of my career, because in that issue, we built trust and mutual respect. And then a final lesson that is perhaps the simplest, but has a big impact on my life. I've had the opportunity to work with an executive coach. And she has told me a number of times, look at it differently and it will change. In other words, what she was telling me is that we all have the power in the way that we behave to change how others interact with us. And while I can't always make it work 100% of the time, I do come back to that lesson often, both in my work and in my personal life. So, those are just a few key points to share with you today. I'm sure that all of you have your lessons learned as well, and we get to share them at some future event. Okay, enough about lessons. I'd like now to shift to talk a little bit about transactions. John, was there one defining transaction that set the course for your career, a deal that sort of stands out as a watershed moment?
Yeah, well, that would be our 1996 acquisition of Marathon Realty. And to set the stage, Oxford, as I mentioned at the time, had 400 million of assets, had $100 million market cap, and Marathon was $1 billion acquisition. Clearly a franchise bet. And to execute that strategy and make it work, execution and speed and intensity were everything. And we went to great lengths to get launched quickly. The day we closed, every employee from Marathon got a letter we had a town hall, got a letter within an hour with an HR person, that you had a continuing role or you didn't, and here was your severance. Whatever the story was, everybody knew by noon exactly what their future was on the day we closed. And then we also said to people, many times when businesses merge, particularly with a larger business, which Marathon was larger, people spend lots of time considering best practices and how to merge and so on and so forth. But this is the race of our lives. We don't have any time for any of that. So it'll be the Oxford way with all its strengths and imperfections. It'll be what it'll be. And we all have to sing one song sheet, one tune, one objective, and let's go. There's another story that backs up before that. So, I mentioned that, Oxford, when we put it all together, went public in summer of 1995, $400 million, $100 million. That all was made happen by the investment of a Chinese Hong Kong partner, a guy named Charles Chan, that put up $60 million. And so he had control of the company at that time. We'd sought Canadian partners, but no Canadian institutional investor would invest in commercial real estate at that time. We sought out Americans, and they were all slash and burn IRR focused. We, through happenstance, fell upon Charles and his team from Hong Kong, built quite a relationship with them. But as we roll the clock ahead now to the spring of 1996, our stock had gone from $5 to $2.50. So it had only taken us 9 months to cut his $60 million investment in half. I went over to Hong Kong. He met me late at night. We went out to a bar and we're chatting. And I said, Charles, the company's done a little bit better than we thought, but I'm really disappointed about the stock price. And he said to me, John, you worry about the company and the stock will look after itself. And that stuck with me always. The next day, I was in his office and saying, by the way, we'd like to, buy Marathon, and we need you to backstop $150 million equity issue. So I went through the strategy and everything else, and which might have seemed to be a little bit audacious at the time, but it's what we needed. He's a smart, thoughtful guy. He went through it all, and at the end he said, fine, I'll do it. And it was on that basis that we were able to do Marathon. And so the support of stakeholders, selecting stakeholders and having the support of the right stakeholders is fundamental in running a business.
That's great, thanks. So that's following on then from a deal that did get done. Were there any important deals that got away, that didn't get done? What went wrong, and what was the learning in that?
Well, there's lots of deals that have got away, and there's some deals that didn't get away that I wish they had. It's the old story. But I'll share one story from my early career, which has always stayed with me. 1982, I'm the development manager for 150 York, doing the leasing. Leasing was a little bit slow, and we got a big deal going. Weir Falls, a letter of intent, 3 floors, pretty exciting. And we're down to, we'd signed the letter of intent, we'd done the deal, and we're negotiating the lease. And as we're negotiating the lease, there was just more and more like nail-biting little issues that, we couldn't settle. And because it was our fault for digging in too much. Ultimately, it turns out that the partner we were dealing with took it across the street to see Mr. Paul Reichman, who said, oh, I do that deal and don't worry about those issues. And he got the lease, and I was standing there naked. And I had to go talk to my boss at the time, actually my boss's boss, who was a little unpleasant with how that ended up. And he said, well, John, of those 6 issues, how many of them were so important you wouldn't do the deal? And I learned from that lesson that sometimes yes in real estate is an okay answer, because that was a big mistake. The other thing I learned was, if the going gets tough, get a team, have a sounding board, have someone with you, have someone who can help you interpret and know when you're going off the reservation, because that was clearly self-inflicted damage. So that was a good lesson.
We so often learn the very most in the toughest moments. You've lived through a number of real estate cycles. Can you share some learnings from one of those tough times?
The learnings would all be the same, which is they all point to the same issue, which is for me, it's always been the power of a team. In the period from 92 to 95, at Oxford, where, like every piece of news that came in the door was bad, right? You'd have, it just goes on and on. And so what we did, the senior team, 6 of us, is we had what was called huddles and cuddles. So a huddle was, when something bad happened and you needed to meet that day, right? And so a message would be sent around and a time would be picked in the day and we'd all get together. A cuddle was when you had to meet right now. And if somebody called a cuddle, then phones were down, guests were excused and everybody rushed into one meeting room at the same time because clearly somebody was quite anxious. And the huddles and cuddles would all be the same. Somebody would identify what's happened. Somebody would show anger. Somebody would show pain. Someone would tell a joke. Someone would, have anxiety, and someone would have some ideas. And someone, and so as you work that around that team environment, ultimately you talk your way around to a position, a solution, options, whatever it would be. And then with the power of the team, we could take on anything. And I would tell you the same thing in KingSett, because building a business has all sorts of challenges and roadblocks, and you deal with this all the time. But the power of a team and the power of this team is quite phenomenal in addressing, isolating, and socially bonding together over issues and how to think through what to do next. Because with the power of the team, again, there's a great ability to be able to move forward and to address both uncertainty and adversity.
Great. Now moving on to the present, can you give us your views on major Canadian real estate markets today and how they're likely to play out over the COVID cycle? What are you most bullish about? What has major headwinds? And is there likely to be a pleasant surprise when this cycle is over?
So I think you have to start with what's your sociological lens? And which isn't sort of typically the way that we view real estate. But my lens is that we will meet again. My lens is that business mentorship, creativity, productivity, innovation is actually a live sport and very difficult to do over Zoom. If we were in a meeting, I know all of you would be listening to me. Now there's 110 of you. I'm not sure how many of you are doing your emails versus listening to me. It's just the state of the world, right? So I think we will need to congregate again in social settings, in work settings, and the power of the great cities will reemerge as a great attractor of human beings, places of commerce, innovation, so on, as it's been for the millennia. So that's my base case. Now, as we go to individual asset classes, I think that office will see some headwinds. We're seeing that now, a little vacancy, but that will move on. I think in cities, I think are way overdone. And as for a surprise, I think the surprise will be mall retail. And I say that because the expectations of mall retail are so low and so apocalyptic. I think it'll be better than that.
Great. Let's turn now to developing talent. How do you identify talent, and what do you do to help talent develop and succeed?
So I think talent is all about attitude, not aptitude. Let's assume that when you're interviewing for a job, that the applicants can all be pre-screened for general IQ or aptitude, whatever. What makes winners is their attitude. And attitude is the ability to be all in, to be present, to be balanced, to be, have social skills. Because increasingly in this digitized and information commoditized world, EQ is the answer, not IQ. And so when I'm talking to people and trying to understand who would be a fit here, I'm totally focused on social issues, their ability to build a relationship, and their EQ.
Great. Next.
I only answered half that question, didn't I?
Oh.
Let me answer the other half of that question. Because how do you identify, and then how do you help them succeed? Sorry about that. So the second piece of the puzzle, because I wrote it down, so I should read the second piece. The second piece of the puzzle is making sure that once you have selected people, that personal development is a lot about giving people new challenges and not micromanaging them, and letting people make decisions and sometimes make mistakes. And mistakes are just a byproduct of decisions. And I think that it's essential that people be given opportunity and to address new challenges, because that's the only way someone can, adapt and grow and learn into the next level.
Terrific. That's great. I'd like to explore now diversity and inclusiveness, which has always been an important topic, but has taken on new prominence today. What advice would you give other CEOs about the value of diversity in business, and how can we better support women in the workplace?
Well, I mean, there's no question, and the literature, the research, the discussion is all very clear that diversity makes better decisions. Having diverse viewpoints, people that have come from a different, a different journey, whether that's, any, gender, racial, birthplace, education, whatever that is, will always make a better decision. I think to try and encourage specifically, women in the workplace, you need to focus on coaching. And coaching isn't, seminars or scheduled reviews, et cetera, are important, but coaching is kind of every day. Anna's story about the Edmonton Center Audit Committee 400 years ago was really, instant feedback when I recognized someone who really controlled the room, done a great job. And I told her that, and I thanked her for that. And I hadn't known that until you mentioned that just in these remarks. So that's quite interesting. But it's mentorship is every day, giving feedback, giving identifying and recognizing the contribution of your team. And we're trying to create an environment that welcomes a family life and the balance of a family life. And there's unique skills learned by being a parent and learned by being a mother. And they're hugely important in work life or workplace applications. So, it's important to respect and accommodate those extra responsibilities.
Absolutely, to provide the flexibility that everybody really needs to achieve balance in their family and work life. Okay, great. I'd like to explore a little bit how you think that managing has changed in this pandemic cycle. Is there something we need to do differently to lead people in these difficult times?
Well, I think, you can't communicate too much, particularly in the early parts of the crisis when people were particularly isolated and fearful. I think, it was a need of leadership to be communicating on a, in our case, a daily basis through the whole team about what we're seeing, what we're doing, prospects for the company, et cetera, et cetera. But as we get into a longer tail here, it is difficult. KingSett's brought people back, right? So we're now mostly in the office, but I think it's a challenge, with mentorship and career development when it's a Zoom environment, and leadership needs to talk to people. But I must tell you that I'm used to talking to our people in the room, and you get feedback from those people in the room. And when you talk to people on a screen, it's a much different skill set, which is a harder thing to do because there's nothing coming back. So it's hard to get energy. But which is, so it is important that we try to manage people's fear. Let's live, my glass is half full, not half empty, because what we're doing is we're going on offense, because while there's issues out there, there's also opportunities. And that's where this game gets exciting.
That's great. Okay, let's go to some thoughts on closing before we go to question and answers. What keeps you awake at night these days?
I think the only thing is really government policy and intervention. We've had massive intervention in all of our lives over the last 180 days. And I'm not going to criticize any of that activity. Decisions made in a panic, they're so difficult. And some will be easy to criticize. I'm not interested in that. The challenge is, where do we go next? Because, we're running a deficit of $1 billion a day, which is unsustainable. We have to make sure we don't institutionalize emergency spending and make it permanent. We have to sort of get back to opening up our economy, when it's safe to do that, and getting back to, running a bit more balanced budget. As individuals, I don't think many of us live our lives spending 30% more than we're taking in. So the governments can't do that either. Otherwise, that comes back to. So, government policy at all levels, is what would be my greatest concern.
All right. Okay, well then why don't we try to sum up this part of the presentation by talking a little bit about the advice that we would each give our younger selves. Over to you first, John.
Well, I'd say first and foremost, stay true to your values. Nothing's more fundamental than staying on values. The second thing is take things one day at a time. Do your very best. Try to exceed expectations one day at a time, and build a network, a broad network, a diverse network, diverse by what people are doing, and that'll give you a lot of impact. Anna?
It's great. I would say that I would spend a lot less time second guessing myself, doubting myself. That's a lot of wasted emotion, and it takes energy away from doing the best that you can do every day. So I would make sure that I would deal with that sooner in my career. And the other thing is that I would also focus a little earlier on in building a network, which is why organizations like Toronto Crew are so important, that help us, of course, in achieving that objective in networking. So on that note, I would like to now turn it over to Q&A. If there are any questions from the audience, we will take them now.
So there's one at the bottom.
Yes.
So here's the first question.
Yeah.
It's to me. It says, John, what motivated you to leave Oxford and start KingSett? And it's, I sort of mentioned it quickly, but I guess there was a number of different things that sort of coalesced at the same time at the end of Oxford, this was the beginning of 2001. And fundamentally, we'd have to make different decisions about go deep or go long, as I mentioned in my comments. In addition, NASDAQ was melting down, and that was causing pressure on office demand. And I was concerned that having been in the ditch, having moved the company into a good spot, I didn't really want to have my hands on it back into the ditch. So there was a number of those things, and there came an opportunity to make what I thought was a pretty attractive investment deal and selling it to Oxford. Now, I'll tell you, the deal was done in the August long weekend in 2001. And my 9/11 story is I was in Vancouver. I woke up in the morning of 9/11, and our legal counsel, and there's 2 phone mail messages. These are days when people would phone your hotel room. So I had 2 messages. The first one was from my lawyer at Oxford, who'd said, John, the paper's all done, the press release and everything else, and the deal is now firm, done, and irreversible. And then the second email was from my wife saying, turn on your TV, as we know the tragic events that ensued on that day. Okay.
Okay. Why don't I take the next one here for you and read it to you? How do you expect technology evolution, such as prop tech, to transform the real estate landscape as we know it today? And how should organizations prepare themselves for this next phase of evolution in our industry?
Yeah, technology has a role in every bit of life. And I must say that we have seen technology. We've been using lots of technological advancement, which one may not have noticed, but over the last period of years. And I think that will continue. I don't think there'll be any particular big bang. One has to say, what are the problems technology is trying to solve? So if you take Scotia Plaza, for example, everything here is hands-free. Parking is you swipe with a card or you swipe with your Visa. You never touch a door handle. Washrooms are everything's hands-free. I use my pass is computed with the elevators so that I just swipe it by the thing and the elevator door opens. We have Bluetooth access in our new residential buildings. We have an enormous amount of technology in building operations, everything in the control center. I went down and had a tour of our control center here, a couple months ago. And, I thought I was in an air traffic control center. And they said, no, we have more technology than they do. Anyway, so I think that'll continue. The challenge with prop tech is, because there's a lot of buzz and spin and excitement. You have to make sure you understand the problem that you need to have solved, because successful technologies are more about the problem than the technology. And if you think of an Uber, for example, it's actually relatively light technology, but it's great end-to-end solution, which has transformed an industry. I don't, I'm not satisfied we'll see anything transformative because I don't think this way of communication will replace face-to-face. But we will see continued all sorts of advancements in every form of real estate that are used for customer comfort.
Here's a good one. Can you talk a little bit about your direction with the upcoming acquisition of Northview?
The direction. Well, Northview really we identified as a group of assets that fit in three different investment theses. There's one piece of that portfolio, about 15%, that we said are ultra core. So these are assets that what we consider lifers, own for long term, and they will go in our income fund and produce those kind of returns, and we will do CapEx as required to continue to move those assets up the quality scale. The second group are assets where we thought they're transitional. They need a bit of investment and they'll have a different value, and then we'll sell them. So that they're in our growth fund, and that's about half the portfolio. The third group is a group of assets that has lots of cash flow intensity, but perhaps not a lot of growth. And that's going in the new public vehicle, the Northview high yield multi-residential REIT. And those are great assets. It's a great play. It's a 10% distribution, et cetera, et cetera. So each one of them has got a different investment characteristics, and we've matched them to different investment capital.
Okay. Women in senior management roles often find it difficult to progress to C-suite level roles. What do you think are the key challenges for women to face in this regard? And what can organizations do differently to promote this growth?
So I must say, this is one of the most frustrating things that I, as a business leader, struggle with, because we don't have as many women as we'd like in senior management roles. And when we've recruited in specific roles, we've actually wanted to select a woman, not to be because that's politically correct or socially responsible. It's because we want that different viewpoint. And it's been difficult for us to find those people. It's an ongoing question that I frankly don't have a quick answer to. I mean, maybe Anna, you have a comment.
Yeah, I think without question, there's a problem of unconscious bias in the workplace. We're becoming more aware of this issue. We're getting ourselves educated, I think, as an industry, and becoming more aware of the different talents that people bring to the table. And I do think that our industry has been changing pretty dramatically over the last certainly 10 to 15 years, particularly in the area of finance, where you see a lot of CFOs now that are women in our industry. But it is changing, but there needs to be a lot of education, and I think there needs to be a lot of awareness about the problem of unconscious bias and offering more opportunities to women. And I am very hopeful. I think there's a light that's being shone on this issue currently, and I'm very hopeful that things will continue to change at a more rapid pace going forward. And we need organizations such as Toronto Crew that also help promote the advancement of women.
And Anna's point, I mean, staff roles are I think now well represented with gender diversity across the industry. We've got to move that to line roles, and so the work's not done.
But fortunately, I've seen such a dramatic change in a lot of line role where we see lots more women, particularly in development and construction. We see young women that are advocating for themselves and seeking roles that they previously would not have been considered for. I'm very hopeful that we'll continue to see a change in this.
It would be the right answer.
Yeah. Okay. There's a great question with regards to boards. What advice could you provide aspiring women leaders interested in joining boards, and what challenges or opportunities should they prepare for in the board journey?
I think every board is looking to add talented, quality women to their boards. I think if you're looking to get a board role, I would do three things. One is I would take the ICD course. I think it's kind of a baseline, director proficiency course, and I think it is constructive. Rodman, it's expensive, but whatever. I would take that. Secondly, I would identify the industries that you have an interest in. And if you're in real estate, it's probably not real estate. In other words, I think it's better to be in a governance role in an industry where you don't necessarily have a micro understanding what's going on, which can cloud kind of governance decisions. And the third is getting a board role is getting a job. So you got to have a resume, get a headhunter, tell them what you want, tell them why you think you're qualified, and go at it. But I think this is an area where I don't think there's a board in the country that wouldn't like to add a talented, quality, female director. So there's lots of opportunity if someone's thoughtful, prepared, and strategic.
Great. For young people,
so here's one of the
retail.
Yeah,
okay,
well, you could do that, or you could do the young person.
Well, we start with the young person. For young people entering the industry, what would you tell them is the most rewarding aspect of a career in commercial real estate?
So, this is a people business, and I think you're engaging with people all the time, and our business is totally centered around solving somebody else's problem, whether you're in property management or leasing or development, whether you're in a line role, staff role, and it's a big industry, lots of options for career development. And for young people coming into this business, if you can find your niche in the industry. And because if you're a bit more sales oriented, maybe you go here. If you're a bit more analytical, maybe you go there. If you're a bit more personal, maybe you go there, and there's lots of opportunity throughout the industry, and I think I've been blessed with a great career over 200 or 300 years, and it really has been a lot of fun.
All right, here's a retail question. You mentioned that retail might avoid the apocalypse and surprise everyone. What would you predict will change this outcome to be a more positive one?
So turns out, it's my view, humans like to see other humans. And it's as simple as that. I don't think anybody wants to sit in their basement and work at home, shop at home, and never go out. Now, I shouldn't say it, no one, but the reality is that people are social animals. And I think retail properties that can present a proper experience to the customer, can give them an option where they go out and they're energized because there's a buzz and there's things for them to do, and they meet their friends and whatever. I don't think that changes. I think the retail experience has to change. It has been evolving. It has to continue to evolve. But I think there'll always be a place for great retail. And if you've got really weak retail center, in a tough location, well, that may be something that has to be retrofitted. But is Yorkdale going to close up? I don't think so. So I think I think retail will actually do better than most people think, because people want to get out of their house. I don't know about you. I got cabin fever, and there's only so many times you can walk around the block and call that an experience. So I just think we're social animals, and getting back into shopping centers is something that we will all do.
There's a question from the audience regarding data and metrics, and how do you balance, gathering data versus your gut experience and relationship and decision making?
So, data only becomes information when it tells a story. And to tell a story, you have to have some experience, because no amount of data can drive a decision unless the person reviewing the data can distill it and have it have it inform the narrative. Now, I would tell you that most businesses and almost all business decisions are made with imperfect information and imperfect data. And sometimes too much data is just too much data. So, I've often said that when we're looking at a new investment or whatever it might be, you have to start with a pad and a piece of paper. And the reason I say that is because, too often we get into 1,000-cell Excel spreadsheet, which takes 800 imperfect assumptions and comes out with a perfect answer. But it's actually bullshit. Because at the end of the day, explain to me in simple terms, without an HP12C or an Excel XIRR, what exactly it is we're doing. And in decision making, being able to get above microanalysis to really understand what's going on, I think is fundamental. So for what data do I use? I mean, there's lots of data out there. Depends on what the circumstance is. The most important thing is to rise above it and try to use a simpler way to communicate and explain the opportunity or the decision you're trying to make.
Okay, message from question from the audience. You've worked your way up from leasing coordinator to CEO. What did you find most challenging when moving from an individual contributor role to a leadership executive role? And for those of us that are looking to move up, what advice would you give?
Okay, so like 100%, great question. 100%, the most difficult thing is delegating a task to somebody else, particularly a task you're competent in. Because we all have a bias that, really I could take that meeting and really handle that issue perhaps better than you, or I can negotiate that better than you, or maybe I address this issue, but like it is what it is, right? But you can't go into management and move up unless you are able to delegate. And I tell you, Oxford in 1992 was relatively simple platform, 10 million square feet, basically 10 projects. I'd done every joint venture agreement, every loan agreement, major tenants. Like I knew everything about everything. 1992. 1995, we're running 40 million square feet. There's buildings I hadn't even been to. There's people, I've met everybody, but I mean, like totally different world, right? And that leap, you really have to trust. You have to change your instincts from saying I can do to I can ask someone else to do, help them to do it, not micromanage, but coach and do those sorts of things. And it's a journey. And I didn't have anyone. I didn't have my personal coach. I mean, I couldn't afford lunch, much less personal coach. So it was like a trial and error. But that's the single different thing, because to be a leader, you can't be on the ice, on the bench, and up in the box. You got to pick.
That's great. Okay, over to Farah.
Thank you both for that amazing discussions. I have all the sun coming in on me right now. I gained a lot of great little nuggets from this conversation. So I think on leadership, Jon, you said lead with values. The right thing is always the right thing. That really resonated with me. Consult and then decide. Loved that. And be bold. And then Anna, inspiring confidence. You've always done that for me. Personally. So I really appreciated this chat. There were so many good nuggets. Thank you both. And thank you to KingSett for hosting this event. Thank you to all of you that have joined from afar across the country as well. And to our non-members that tuned in today. Happy to chat with you about what a membership with Toronto Crew could look like. We've been doing some very exciting things and have lots in store for the rest of this year and beyond. So thank you to everyone who tuned in, and we'll see you guys again soon, hopefully.